My name is Emma Collins. I'm 28 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew exactly what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Standing in my childhood bedroom, staring at an empty garment bag where my wedding dress should have been, I felt something inside me crack. Not break. Crack. Like ice on a frozen lake, spreading thin lines that would eventually shatter everything beneath. The dress wasn't just any dress. It was my grandmother's 1952 Chantilly lace gown, carefully preserved, lovingly altered, and meant to be the centerpiece of my wedding to David in just 5 days. 5 days! My hands trembled as I called my sister Rachel. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice honey-sweet and completely unbothered. "Emma, what's up, bride-to-be?" "Rachel, where is my wedding dress?" Silence. Then a laugh. Light, airy, like we were discussing borrowed jewelry instead of the most important garment of my life. "Oh, that old thing, I needed it for Mark's company party tonight. You know how important these events are for his career." I sat down hard on my childhood bed, the same bed where Rachel and I used to whisper secrets and plan our future weddings. The irony wasn't lost on me. You took my wedding dress, without asking, for a party. "Emma, don't be dramatic. It's just hanging in my closet. I'll bring it back tomorrow, probably." Probably. That single word ignited something primal in me. This wasn't the first time Rachel had taken something of mine. Growing up, she'd borrowed my clothes, my books, even my boyfriend in high school. But this was different. This was sacred. "Rachel, you need to bring that dress back right now, tonight, before you even think about wearing it." Another laugh, this one with an edge. "Relax, Emma. It's not like you're getting married tomorrow. Besides, you know how good I look in vintage. Mark's boss will be so impressed." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, processing what had just happened. My little sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, had stolen my wedding dress and planned to wear it to seduce her boyfriend's boss. But here's what Rachel didn't know about me. I'd spent the last 10 years as a corporate attorney, specializing in hostile takeovers. I knew how to strategize, how to plan, and most importantly, how to win. If Rachel wanted to play games with the most important day of my life, I was about to show her what happened when you challenge someone who made their living destroying people professionally. I picked up my phone again, but this time I didn't call Rachel. I called my maid of honor Jessica and my cousin Sarah. If Rachel thought she could manipulate the situation like she had every other conflict in our family, she was about to learn a very expensive lesson. "Jess, it's Emma. Cancel your plans for tonight. We have work to do." Jessica arrived at my apartment within an hour, armed with coffee, chocolate, and the kind of righteous anger that only a best friend can summon on your behalf. "She did what?" Jessica's voice pitched so high, my neighbors probably heard her. "She stole your grandmother's wedding dress for a work party?" "Not just any work party," I said, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "A party where she's trying to impress Mark's boss. She's literally using my wedding dress as a tool to advance her boyfriend's career." Sarah burst through my front door without knocking, a privilege earned through 28 years of family chaos. "I came as soon as I got your text. What's the plan?" This is why I loved my cousin. No questions about whether I was overreacting, no attempts to play peacemaker, just immediate readiness for war. "First, we need intel," I said, pulling out my laptop. "Rachel's at the Hilton downtown for Mark's company event. It's some kind of networking mixer for his law firm." Hartwell, Brass, and Associates. I looked them up. Very stuffy, very traditional, the kind of place where appearances matter more than actual competence. Perfect. I felt a smile creep across my face, the same smile I wore in boardrooms when I was about to dismantle an opponent's entire argument. "Sarah, you still have contacts from your event planning days, right? What do you need?" access to the Hilton's event staff, maybe a friendly server who wouldn't mind earning some extra cash for providing information. Sarah was already scrolling through her phone. I know exactly the person. Maria worked every high-end event in the city before she started her own catering business. If anyone can get us inside information, it's her. While Sarah made her call, I turned to Jessica. I need you to contact David and explain what's happening. Tell him the wedding is still on, but we might need to adjust a few details. What kind of details? The kind that ensure Rachel learns some consequences for her actions. Jessica studied my face. We'd been friends since college, and she knew that look. Emma, what are you planning? Something Rachel will never forget. 20 minutes later, Sarah hung up her phone with a satisfied grin. Maria's working the Hartwell event tonight. She says Rachel showed up an hour ago in what she described as the most beautiful vintage wedding dress she's ever seen. Apparently, she's been telling everyone it's a family heirloom she inherited from her grandmother. My blood pressure spiked. Not only had Rachel stolen my dress, but she was lying about its origin, claiming my grandmother's legacy as her own. There's more, Sarah continued. Mark looks mortified. He's been trying to stay close to Rachel all night, probably to minimize the damage. His colleagues are definitely noticing the dress. It's exactly the kind of attention-grabbing move that could backfire spectacularly in a conservative law firm. Good, I said. What else? The party ends at 10. Rachel's planning to keep the dress until tomorrow, maybe longer. She told someone she might wear it to a brunch this weekend. Jessica and I exchanged looks. This was worse than I had thought. Rachel wasn't just borrowing my dress for one event, she was treating it like her own personal wardrobe edition. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Looking forward to seeing you in Grandma's dress on Saturday. She would be so proud. The irony was suffocating. My mother had no idea that at this very moment, her younger daughter was parading around in that same dress, lying about its history to impress strangers. But as I read my mother's message, an idea began forming, a brilliant, potentially devastating idea that would give Rachel exactly what she deserved while ensuring justice for the woman who'd originally worn that dress with dignity and grace. Ladies, I said, setting down my phone with newfound calm, I think it's time we crashed a party. The Hilton's 23rd floor was buzzing with the kind of forced networking energy that made my skin crawl. Men in identical navy suits clustered around high-top tables, while their partners, smiled and nodded at conversations about quarterly projections and client acquisition. And there, in the center of it all, was my sister. Rachel looked stunning, I had to admit. My grandmother's dress fit her perfectly, the ivory chantilly lace catching the ambient lighting like it was designed for this exact moment. She was holding court with 3 older men who were clearly enchanted by her charm, and, let's be honest, the way the vintage silhouette showcased her figure. "She's good," Jessica whispered beside me. We'd managed to blend into the crowd thanks to Sarah's event planning connections and some creative name badge switching. But she has no idea what's coming. I watched Rachel laugh at something one of the men said, her hand delicately placed on his forearm in that practiced way she'd perfected in high school. She was working the room like a professional, and for a moment, I almost respected her audacity. But then I saw Mark's face. My sister's boyfriend stood 10 feet away, nursing what looked like his 4th drink of the evening. His expression was a mixture of embarrassment and barely contained panic. Every few minutes, his eyes would dart to Rachel, then to his colleagues, then to the floor. He knew this was a mistake, but he was too weak to stop it. "Phase 1, I murmured to Jessica, then made my way toward the group surrounding Rachel. "Excuse me," I said, tapping one of the older gentlemen on the shoulder. "I couldn't help but notice that beautiful dress. It looks like a genuine 1950s piece." Rachel's head snapped toward me, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally naked terror in the span of 3 seconds. "Emma? What are you doing here?" "Oh, you know me in vintage fashion,"
I said brightly, addressing the group rather than Rachel directly. "I'm actually somewhat of an expert on mid-century bridal wear. That dress is particularly special. Chantilly lace from 1952, handmade by seamstresses in New York. The craftsmanship is extraordinary." One of the men, silver-haired, probably a senior partner, leaned in with interest. "Bridal wear? You mean this is a wedding dress?" "Oh, yes," I said, my smile growing wider. "A wedding dress with quite the story. The original bride wore it to marry her sweetheart after he returned from Korea. They had 63 years of marriage before she passed away. The dress was supposed to be worn by her granddaughter this Saturday." The group fell silent. Rachel's face had gone completely white. "Supposed to be?" the silver-haired man asked. "Well, there's been a bit of a family situation," I said, my voice carrying just enough sadness to be convincing. "The bride-to-be discovered that someone had taken the dress without permission. Can you imagine? Stealing a family heirloom like that?" Mark appeared at Rachel's elbow like a ghost, his face ashen. "Rachel, we need to talk, now." But Rachel was trapped. The group was staring at her with a mixture of fascination and horror, waiting for her response to my story, a story that everyone now realized was about her. It's not," Rachel stammered, then seemed to rally. "Emma, you're being dramatic again. I told you I'd bring it back." "After you wear it to brunch this weekend?" I asked sweetly. "Yes, I heard about your plans." The silver-haired man looked between us with dawning understanding. "Are you the bride-to-be?" he asked me. "I am, Emma Collins, getting married this Saturday in my grandmother's dress, assuming I get it back in time for the alterations that are scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Rachel," Mark hissed, grabbing her arm. "We need to leave, now." But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "Actually," I said, raising my voice slightly so that other nearby groups could hear, "I'm curious about something, Rachel. When you told these lovely people that this was a family heirloom you inherited from your grandmother, were you planning to mention that it's actually my inheritance and that you took it from my apartment without asking?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the gossip networks firing up around the room. In a firm like Hartwell, Brass and Associates, reputation was everything. And Mark's girlfriend had just been exposed as a liar and a thief in front of the people who would determine his career trajectory. But Rachel surprised me. Instead of backing down or apologizing, she lifted her chin and met my gaze with defiance. "You know what, Emma? You're right. I did take your dress. And you know why? Because for once in my life, I wanted to feel special. I wanted to be the one people noticed, instead of standing in your shadow like I have my entire life." The raw emotion in her voice caught me off guard, but I couldn't let it derail my plan. "So you decided to steal from me, to lie to these people, to potentially ruin Mark's career because you felt overshadowed? His career will be fine. Unlike you, I actually care about the people I love. I'm trying to help Mark succeed." "By wearing a stolen wedding dress to a work function?" That's when Mark finally found his voice. "Rachel, stop talking, please. We need to leave right now." But the damage was done. The silver-haired man, who I'd now identified as the managing partner, based on how the other associates kept glancing at him, cleared his throat. "Young man," he said to Mark, "I think you and your companion might want to step outside for a moment." As Mark practically dragged Rachel toward the exit, she turned back to me with tears in her eyes. "I hate you," she said loud enough for half the room to hear. "I've always hated you." And just like that, they were gone, leaving me standing in a circle of strangers who now knew far more about my family drama than I'd ever intended to share. But as I watched Rachel disappear through the exit doors, still wearing my grandmother's dress, I realized that phase 1 had just been the beginning. Now came the real payback.
The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mother. I knew Rachel had gotten home and spun some version of events that painted her as the victim and me as the villain. It was her specialty, taking any situation where she was clearly in the wrong and somehow making herself the injured party. But I'd spent the night planning phase 2 of my response, and I was ready for whatever story she'd concocted. My mother answered on the first ring. "Good morning to you too, Mom. I'm assuming Rachel called." She came home in tears. She said you humiliated her in front of Mark's colleagues, that you made her look like a criminal. She's devastated. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that my mother only knew Rachel's version of events. "Mom, did she mention why she was at that party wearing my wedding dress?" A pause. "She said she borrowed it for one evening. She was trying to help Mark make a good impression." Borrowed implies that she asked permission? Another pause, longer this time. "Emma, surely you could have handled this privately. Did you really need to confront her publicly?" This was the pattern in our family. Rachel's actions were always minimized, while my reactions were scrutinized and criticized. I was tired of it. "Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Rachel didn't borrow my wedding dress. She took it from my apartment while I was at work. She planned to keep it through the weekend, wearing it to multiple events. She lied to strangers about its history, claiming that Grandma's dress was her inheritance. And when I found her wearing it, she told me she hated me in front of a room full of people." Silence. "Mom?" "She was just upset, Emma. You know how dramatic Rachel can be when she's emotional." "And what about when I'm emotional, Mom? What about the fact that your younger daughter stole my wedding dress 5 days before my wedding?" "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a dress." Just a dress. Those 3 words crystallized something that had been building in me for years. To my mother, nothing I cared about was ever important enough to defend. Rachel's feelings, Rachel's reputation, Rachel's happiness, those were sacred. But my wedding dress was just a dress. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice deadly calm. "It is just a dress. So I'm sure you won't mind when I tell you about the conversation I had with Grandma's neighbors this morning." "What neighbors?" "The Hendersons. You know, the couple who lived next door to Grandma for 40 years. They've been following our family updates on Facebook, and they were so excited to see Grandma's dress at my wedding. So excited, in fact, that they've been planning to attend the ceremony." "Emma, what are you talking about?" "I called them this morning to let them know there might be a slight delay in the proceedings. I explained that there was some confusion about who was supposed to wear Grandma's dress and that we needed to sort out the family logistics." I could practically hear my mother's blood pressure rising. The Hendersons weren't just neighbors. They were pillars of the community, the kind of people whose opinions carried weight in my parents' social circle. "You didn't..." I also called Aunt Margaret. You know how close she was to Grandma. She was very interested to hear about Rachel's new appreciation for vintage fashion. "Emma, stop." And I reached out to the church auxiliary. Several of the ladies remembered helping Grandma with the dress alterations back in 1952. They're thrilled to hear it's being worn again, and they can't wait to see which granddaughter will be honoring Grandma's memory on Saturday. "Emma Marie." The interesting thing about small communities, Mom, is how quickly news travels. By noon today, half of town will know that there's some kind of dispute over Grandma's wedding dress. They'll be watching very carefully to see how our family handles a situation involving stolen heirloom clothing. My mother was quiet for a long moment. I could picture her in the kitchen, probably gripping the counter with white knuckles, as she processed the social implications of what I'd just told her. "What do you want?" she finally asked.
I want my dress back, clean, undamaged, and hanging in my closet by 5 o'clock this afternoon. I want Rachel to apologize, not to me, but to the memory of the woman whose legacy she's been parading around in. And I want you to acknowledge that what she did was wrong. And if you do that, then tomorrow's wedding will be beautiful. The Hendersons will take lovely photos to share with their friends, and everyone will remember what a wonderful tribute it was to Grandma's memory. And if you don't, I smiled, even though she couldn't see it, then Saturday will be very interesting indeed. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of finally using my mother's own tactics against her. She'd spent decades managing our family's reputation through careful social maneuvering. Now, I was simply applying the same strategy to protect what was mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Any word from the enemy camp? I texted back, Phase 2 complete. Rachel has until 5 p.m. to return the dress. And if she doesn't? I looked at the list of contact numbers I'd compiled the night before, reporters from 3 local newspapers, the social media coordinator for our town's historical society, and the wedding photographer who'd been hired to document my grandmother's dress being worn by the next generation. Then Phase 3 will be legendary.
At 4:47 p.m., Rachel appeared at my front door with the dress bag in her hands and tears streaming down her face. "I hope you're happy," she said, shoving the bag toward me. "I hope destroying my relationship was worth it." I took the bag, but didn't invite her inside. "What are you talking about?" "Mark's firm called an emergency meeting this morning. His managing partner wanted to discuss the incident at last night's event. Mark's been put on probation, and they're reassessing his fit with the firm culture." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a flicker of guilt. I'd wanted to teach Rachel a lesson, but I hadn't intended to destroy Mark's career. "Rachel, I'm sorry that Mark—" "No, you're not. You planned this whole thing. The way you showed up at that party, the things you said, it was calculated to cause maximum damage." She wasn't wrong. I had calculated every word, every revelation, every moment of that confrontation. But I'd calculated it to embarrass Rachel, not to ruin an innocent man's career. "What about you?" I asked. "Did you ever stop to calculate the damage you were doing when you stole my dress? When you lied about its history? When you told me you hated me in front of strangers?" Rachel's face crumbled. "I don't hate you, Emma. I never hated you. I'm so tired of being the disappointment." The raw honesty in her voice caught me off guard. For 28 years, I'd seen Rachel as the golden child, the one who got away with everything, while I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But looking at her now, I saw something different. A woman who'd spent her entire life feeling like she was living in someone else's shadow. "You're not a disappointment," I said quietly. "Yes, I am. You're the successful lawyer with the perfect fiancé and the beautiful apartment. I'm the unemployed art student whose boyfriend just got fired because of my stupidity." "Mark got fired?" "As good as. They're making his life so miserable that he'll quit within a month." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "And you know what's the worst part? I did this to myself. I saw that dress hanging in your closet, and I couldn't stand the thought of you looking perfect on your wedding day, while I sat in the audience wearing some discount dress from Macy's." I sat down beside her on the steps, still holding the dress bag. "So you decided to wear my dress instead?" I thought, God, I sound so stupid saying this out loud.
I thought if I could just be you for one night, confident, successful, admired, then maybe Mark would see me differently. Maybe his colleagues would respect me. Maybe I'd finally understand what it feels like to be the person everyone notices for the right reasons. The irony was devastating. Rachel had spent our entire lives thinking I was the favored one, while I'd grown up believing she could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. We'd both been wrong, and we'd both been hurt by assumptions we'd never bothered to challenge. "Rachel," I said carefully, "do you remember what you said to me on the phone yesterday when I asked you to bring the dress back?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I said a lot of things yesterday. You said you'd bring it back probably. That one word told me you didn't think my wedding was important enough to prioritize over your own plans." I was scared. I knew you'd be angry, and I thought if I could just make it through the party, maybe I could figure out how to fix things. But you made it worse by planning to wear it to brunch too. I know it was wrong. For one night, I felt beautiful. I felt special, and I didn't want to give that up. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing 28 years of misunderstood sisterhood. "Can I see it?" Rachel asked, nodding toward the dress bag. I unzipped the bag carefully, revealing the pristine ivory lace that had somehow survived Rachel's night out without a single stain or tear. She'd actually taken good care of it, which surprised me. "It really is beautiful," she said softly. "Grandma must have been stunning." She was. Dad showed me the wedding photos once. She looked so happy, so confident, like she knew exactly who she was and what she wanted from life. "Like you," Rachel said. "Like both of us," I corrected. "We just want different things." Rachel stood up, brushing off her jeans. "I should go. I need to start job hunting, and I should probably find a way to apologize to Mark's entire law firm." "Rachel, wait." I stood, too, an idea forming. What if there was a way to fix this? What if you could turn this disaster into something positive? She looked skeptically at me. "How? What did you major in before you switched to art?" "Public relations." "Why? And you're good with people when you're not terrified and making terrible decisions?" A small smile crossed her face. "Usually, yes. Mark's firm handles corporate law, right? They probably need help with client relations, event planning, maybe even crisis management, especially after last night." Rachel's eyes widened as she caught on to what I was suggesting. "You think I should apply for a job there?" "I think you should walk into that office Monday morning with a presentation on how to handle public relations disasters, using your own situation as a case study. Show them how someone can take responsibility for their mistakes and turn them into opportunities for growth." That's either brilliant or completely insane. With your luck, it might be both. I handed for the dress bag. "But first, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Tomorrow morning, I want you to bring this dress to my bridal suite at the hotel. I want you to help me get ready for my wedding, and I want you to stand beside me as my maid of honor." Rachel's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked like relief instead of despair. "What about Jessica?" "Jessica will understand. She's been my best friend through everything, but you're my sister, and despite everything that's happened this week, I can't imagine getting married without you there." "Even after I stole your dress and potentially ruined your rehearsal dinner plans and told you I hated you?" "Especially after all that." I smiled. "Besides, if you can survive last night's party, you can survive Mom's reaction when she finds out I changed my maid of honor lineup 12 hours before the wedding." Rachel laughed through her tears. She's gonna kill us both. Probably, but at least we'll go down together. As she walked back to her car, dress bag in hand, I felt something shift in my chest. The anger was still there, along with the hurt and betrayal. But underneath all of that was something I hadn't felt for my sister in years: hope. Maybe we could finally figure out how to be sisters instead of competitors. Maybe it was time we both stopped living in each other's shadows and started casting our own light.
Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes you believe in fairy tale endings. I woke up in my bridal suite, surrounded by flowers, photographs, and the controlled chaos of wedding day preparations. My mother was directing the photographer with military precision, while Jessica organized makeup brushes like she was preparing for battle. And in the corner, carefully hanging on a vintage dress form, was my grandmother's wedding dress, returned, undamaged, and waiting for its moment to shine. Rachel arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying coffee for everyone and looking more nervous than I felt. "I wasn't sure you'd actually want me here," she said quietly, handing me a cup. "I wasn't sure either, but I'm glad you came." The morning flew by in a blur of curling irons, safety pins, and the kind of chaotic organization that only happens on wedding days. My mother fussed over every detail, Jessica kept everyone on schedule, and Rachel quietly helped wherever she was needed. It wasn't until I was standing in front of the full-length mirror, finally wearing my grandmother's dress, that the magnitude of the week hit me. The dress fit perfectly. The alterations had been completed just in time, and the ivory chantilly lace looked exactly as it was meant to: timeless, elegant, and full of love stories. "Oh, Emma," my mother breathed, tears in her eyes. "You look just like her." For the first time in days, I felt the tension in my shoulders relax. This was how it was supposed to be: surrounded by the women I loved, wearing a dress that connected me to generations of strong women who'd walked this path before me. "Thank you," I said to Rachel, who was adjusting my veil with the careful attention of someone who understood exactly how precious this moment was. "For what?" "For bringing her back to me." Rachel's hands stilled. "Emma, I need to tell you something about Thursday night." "What about it?" "When I was wearing this dress, talking to those people at Mark's party, I felt like a fraud. Not just because I'd stolen it, but because I knew I wasn't honoring what it represented. This dress was made for someone who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. That's not me. But it's definitely you." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Jessica answered it and returned with a confused expression. "There's someone here to see you. A man named Harrison Hartwell?" My mother's face went white. "The managing partner from Mark's firm? What is he doing here?" I exchanged glances with Rachel, who looked equally bewildered. "We'll deal with it together," I said firmly. "Whatever this is about, we face it as sisters." Harrison Hartwell was a distinguished man in his 60s, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and carrying a small wrapped gift. He looked completely out of place in our feminine sanctuary of wedding day preparations. "Miss Collins," he said, extending his hand, "I apologize for the intrusion on your wedding day. I wanted to speak with you briefly about the events of Thursday evening." My heart sank. Even on my wedding day, I couldn't escape the consequences of my confrontation with Rachel. "Mr. Hartwell, if this is about my sister, actually, it's about both of you." He glanced between Rachel and me. "May I sit down?" We arranged ourselves awkwardly in the sitting area, me in my wedding dress, Rachel looking like she wanted to disappear, and my mother hovering protectively nearby. Thursday evening was quite an education for my firm. We witnessed a family conflict play out in public, with accusations of theft, deception, and betrayal. It was, frankly, embarrassing for everyone involved.
Rachel looked like she might faint. However, he continued, what happened afterwards was remarkable. Miss Rachel, you could have denied everything, blamed your sister, or simply disappeared. Instead, you took full responsibility for your actions. You called my office Friday morning and requested a meeting to discuss the impact of your behavior on Mark's career. What did you do? I asked Rachel. She shrugged. I couldn't let Mark suffer from my mistakes. Your presentation was one of the most honest, thoughtful analyses of crisis management I've seen in 30 years of practice. You identified the problems, acknowledged the consequences, and proposed concrete solutions. It was impressive work. Where is this going? My mother asked, her protective instincts fully activated. Mr. Hartwell smiled. I'm here to offer Miss Rachel a position with our firm. We need someone who understands both the importance of reputation and the value of accountability. Someone who can help us navigate sensitive situations with clients who find themselves in compromising circumstances. The room fell silent. Rachel stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. You're offering me a job? She finally managed. I'm offering you a career opportunity, crisis management and client relations with a focus on reputation rehabilitation. The salary is competitive, the work is challenging, and frankly, we could use someone who understands that mistakes don't have to be permanent if you're willing to do the hard work of making them right. What about Mark? Rachel asked. Mr. Thompson will be fine. His probation has been lifted, and this entire situation will be viewed as a learning experience for our younger associates. Sometimes a crisis reveals character, and both of you demonstrated character under pressure. Rachel looked at me with tears in her eyes. I don't understand. How did my worst mistake turn into the best thing that's ever happened to me? Because you didn't let it stay a mistake. You turned it into a lesson. Mr. Hartwell stood and handed Rachel the small wrapped gift. This is for you, Miss Emma, a wedding present from the firm. We understand that family heirlooms sometimes require complicated journeys to reach their intended destinations. Inside the box was a delicate silver bracelet, clearly vintage, with a small charm in the shape of a wedding dress. It belonged to my grandmother. She always said that the most beautiful brides were the ones who knew how to forgive. As he left, I looked around the room at the women who had shaped my life. My mother, who had taught me to fight for what I wanted, Jessica, who had stood by me through every battle, and Rachel, who had reminded me that sometimes the people we love most are also the ones who hurt us deepest. So, Rachel said, still looking shock-shelled, I guess we both got what we needed this week. What did you need? I asked. To find out who I am when I stop trying to be you, and to learn that the best way to honor someone isn't to steal their identity, it's to discover your own. An hour later, I walked down the aisle wearing my grandmother's dress, carrying my grandmother's pearl rosary, and feeling the presence of all the strong women who had come before me. David was waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes and a smile that made my heart skip. My father's hand was steady on my arm, and behind me, Rachel walked as my maid of honor, finally comfortable in her own skin. As I said my vows, I caught sight of the Hendersons in the third row, beaming with pride. Aunt Margaret was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and in the very back, I spotted Harrison Hartwell with his wife, both of them smiling like they'd witnessed something special. Maybe they had. Maybe we all had.
6 months later, Rachel called me from her new office at Hartwell, Brass and Associates. Emma, you're never going to believe what just happened. What now? Remember that presentation I gave about crisis management? It just landed us the biggest client in the firm's history. A Fortune 500 company that's dealing with a family succession scandal wants me to lead their reputation rehabilitation campaign. Rachel, that's amazing. And
Mark proposed last night with Grandma's ring. Mom gave it to him after I told her the whole story about the dress. I laughed, remembering how our mother had initially blamed me for the entire situation. Now she told anyone who would listen about how her daughters had turned a family crisis into a triumph of sisterhood. There's something else, Rachel continued. I've been thinking about that night at the Hilton, and I realized something important. I spent so many years thinking you had everything I wanted that I never stopped to figure out what I actually wanted for myself. And now you know. Now I know that I don't want to be you, Emma. I want to be the person who helps other people find their way back from their worst mistakes. I want to be someone who proves that redemption is always possible if you're willing to do the work. As we hung up, I looked down at my wedding ring and thought about the strange journey that had brought us all to this point. Rachel stealing my dress had felt like the ultimate betrayal, but it had forced both of us to confront truths we'd been avoiding our entire lives. She'd learned that trying to live someone else's life was a recipe for disaster. I'd learned that revenge was less satisfying than reconciliation, and that sometimes the best payback was simply allowing people the chance to become better versions of themselves. My grandmother's dress now hung in my closet, carefully preserved for the next generation. But more than that, her legacy of strength, forgiveness, and grace lived on in both of her granddaughters, each of us finally comfortable in our own skin, each of us ready to face whatever challenges came next. Sometimes the most perfect payback isn't destroying someone who's wronged you. Sometimes it's helping them discover who they're meant to be. And sometimes, just sometimes, family drama can lead to the kind of happy ending that no one saw coming. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had a family member cross a line so completely that you had to choose between revenge and reconciliation? What did you choose, and how did it turn out? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Family relationships are complicated, and sometimes the people we love most are also the ones who can hurt us deepest. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to build something better from the wreckage of what was broken. If the story resonated with you, please subscribe for more tales of family drama, personal growth, and the messy beauty of figuring out how to love people who drive you absolutely crazy. Remember, your story isn't defined by the mistakes you make. It's defined by what you choose to do after you make them. Until next time, keep fighting for the relationships that matter, even when they're complicated, especially when they're complicated.